The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
Looking officially at episode 612 of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. My name is Jason Bryant. News, reviews, previews, and interviews from the notable names in and around the sport of wrestling. Episode 612 today. Going to talk a little bit of women's freestyle wrestling with Simona Buibar. She is a Romanian U23 World Team member who has been training in the United States for almost 2 years. We're going to hear her story and about how this global pandemic that is COVID-19 has impacted her trying to get back home to her native country of Romania. Not necessarily stuck here, but she's been kind of stuck here. We'll hear about that, her journey in the sport of wrestling, and more coming up. And I want to thank John Levinson for pitching me this one, and I'll explain that as we get to the interview. A couple things to talk about on the Matt Talk front. Well, we had no Fargo, but you can still get the Fargo Almanac at fargoalmanac.com. It is a $20 purchase. You buy it once, you get updates for life. It is a constantly fluid document, so whenever I see an error or a name spelling that needs to be taken care of, it's updated and you get that automatically sent to you. Those of you like John Giarla, who has gone from just contributor to patron, yeah, that's right, he gets a second shout out. You can go to mattalkonline.com/contribute or mattalkonline.com/join the team to figure out how you can get the Almanac. You can get the NCAA Division I Digital Fan Guide. You can also get access to articles and advanced versions of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast and some exclusive interviews that get thrown up here day or two, sometimes up to 3 days before they get released on the podcast feed. So a lot of you have said that you've liked that, and I appreciate the feedback. And if you are curious about what I'm doing here, I'm doing a lot of historical research for the Matt Talk Podcast Network. A lot of my stuff goes to the Hall of Fame. I have recently updated the hometowns of every single, or at least the home state, of all but 4 of the women's collegiate national All-Americans. That's what was the WCWA and before it, starting in 2004. So of 1,132 athletes, I'm still missing 4 on the search for that. So again, the only place you can find that is with your team membership and joining the Matt Talk Podcast Network by going to mattalkonline.com/join the team. It is a Patreon thing. You get the perks, a number of monthly contributions. But if this is your first time coming through, you haven't listened to this yet, I'm throwing a lot of stuff at you, but that's kind of what this call to action does. So mattalkonline.com, you can find information on how to contribute. You can find information on some dynamic content, on some exclusive content, more than just a podcast here. I'd like to also say Andy and Kyle are back doing the show with On the Mat from Track Wrestling. They've had a dynamic set of guests recently, and they're back on the horse. Andy's a bell cow, or he's a show pony, workhorse, whatever. If you're familiar with the On the Mat program, you'll understand all those little inside jokes. So you want to follow the show at Matt Talk Online. That's also getting your news feed. You can go to mattalkonline.com/news, sign up for a free daily newsletter. There's literally a bevy of options to get wrestling content from the staff of 10 here at Matt Talk Online. That's 10 fingers. So without pretty much beating around the bush, this is Simona Buibar and her story about discovering wrestling and what it's done for her and how she's just trying to get back home here on episode 612 of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast. So as always, I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me, because you've always got time for Short Time. Amidst all the sports cancellations we see around the United States today, one thing that we are not paying attention to are some of the athletes that have been here training and haven't been able to go home. Wait, you haven't heard a story like that? Today, you're going to hear one from Simona Buibar, who has been spending her time in Arizona. She's a member of the Romanian national wrestling team in women's freestyle, competed at the U23 World Championships a couple years ago, and kind of came across this story really interestingly, where I was watching the Flow Wrestling matches on the 25th with Chamizo and Dake, had a little Facebook group chat going on, and all of a sudden, here's your story. So one, welcome to the program. And two, what did you think of the fights that night?
Hi, I'm really glad you pleased to be here. It was great, all the matches were very exciting. I think it was a very exciting event and really nice to follow. My favorite was RBY, so kind of disappointed we didn't get to see Pat Downey versus Taylor. I was most excited for that, but oh well.
Now, before we get into the situation that you've been presented with, you're from Romania. When did you first start wrestling?
I started wrestling in 2016, so I had just turned 18. It was my senior year of high school. And yeah, I saw a match on YouTube. It was Dake versus Jordan Burroughs at the Sunkist Open. And I said, okay, this is what I want to do. And the next day I went to the military wrestling club and said, okay, I'm here. And I stuck with it ever since.
Wow. So yeah, you've not even been wrestling a whole quad yet. I mean, this would have been the quad for you, 2016.
Yeah.
So what was it about that match that was so enticing for you to want to get into the sport?
Literally everything. I mean, I can't really explain it because I didn't really understand the sport, but the takedowns and the parterre and the pinning, and I don't know, it was so exciting to watch, and it's so aesthetic. I think wrestling is very aesthetic. So I was like, okay, they look so strong. I don't even know how to explain it. I was like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. This looks so good. And yeah, that's what I thought was the best about it. It just really looked good.
So you were watching American freestyle wrestling when you were in Romania.
Yes, I was, because when I started wrestling, I didn't really have any partners or coaching. And I started looking for wrestling videos, and most of the wrestling tutorials on YouTube are folk style. So I knew folk style before I knew freestyle.
And I'm sure you go in your wrestling company like, whoa, what is we don't do that here.
Yeah, exactly. Like I had to, unlearn a lot of stuff going into actual freestyle because, I had learned how to switch and the parterre in folk style wrestling. And when I actually went and saw how freestyle wrestling was, I was like, oh, this is not what I knew. This is not what I thought wrestling to be like. But I think freestyle is also very exciting. Albeit not as exciting as folk style, but still very exciting.
Yeah, you're one of the rare freestylers, wrestlers from a freestyle country that actually likes the folk style. Now, when you got into wrestling and you were already in the military, is that what I'm getting?
No, I was not. I had joined the military club before that, and after that, I got recruited into the actual big military team.
Yeah, because you've represented Romania at the World Military Games in the past.
Yes, I actually did last year in Wuhan, right before I came back to America.
So jumping into a sport of wrestling I did it when I was 16 years old, jumping in, and it was just a brutal ending for me. It's not like I even had a whole lot of athletic ability to begin with. You've got to have some type of athletic background that says that's allows you to take to the sport so well.
Yeah, I was very into weightlifting. I had started weightlifting at about 13. So I was already extremely strong. I was already training at around 6 hours per day anyways without wrestling. So my body was very prepared. My body was very well conditioned. I used to do CrossFit as well. So coming into wrestling, yes, I did have athletic background.
There's the fitness level, but a lot of people say when people are coming from MMA or they're training MMA, coming in from jiu-jitsu or other combat sports, there is nothing like wrestling. Explain what what you felt for the first time when you went through your first, big time wrestling practice.
Oh my God, it was so tiring, so tiring. I just couldn't believe it. I even it was really crazy. My first practice was actually a very difficult practice where they had round robins. So, oh my God, I was just puking every 10 minutes. I had to go and run away and puke. It was horrifying. And you have to understand, I was very, very well conditioned. I was training every day, 7 days a week, 2 times a day. I was in the gym, and it was so difficult. Nothing really compares to wrestling conditioning and how exhausting actually wrestling is,
In regards to Romanian women's wrestling, there's a it's a good wrestling country tradition wise, but it may not have the medal count that some of the other Eastern European countries do. But Emilia Vuk is somebody who's had a lot of success, has made a world final, of course, running into the Japanese buzzsaws. But what is the women's wrestling culture like for you, and how did you really discover or meet your teammates, so to speak?
I actually met them straight at the national team. I didn't know them beforehand. Emilia Vuk, she's actually in the military as well, so she's a military team wrestler. as well. Yeah, it was hard for me to transition into female wrestling because I had only wrestled guys before I actually got to wrestle girls on the national team. But we do have pretty good female wrestling. However, we don't have a lot of girls wrestling. So it's a big problem. And this is why I'm in the US actually, because I needed more training partners.
Yeah. So when did you come over to train? How did you get that permission to come over here?
I just told them I will. I mean, I told them, I need to go. I need to step up my game. I got my ass kicked at Worlds. And I was like, okay, I really need something else. I need more partners. I need a more intense training camp. And, most training camps are a month or two. I really wanted to go big. I wanted to do a whole year of a training camp. And, I came to the US because I think the US has the best wrestling in the world in more than just the technical aspect, but also conditioning and so on.
Yeah. So when did you come over?
It was last 2 years ago. It was 2 years ago in January.
Okay. So you've been here for a while and you've been based out of Arizona?
Yeah.
And obviously the draw there is, sun-kissed kids. A lot of good women have come through there and Olympians and such. And what's it like? What's it like training there in Tempe?
Oh, it was amazing, training with the ASU team. Like when I started there, I had Chris Pendleton and Jamil Kelly leading the RTC practices, as well as Zeke Jones. So it was really, really crazy, so much technique and so many people to work with. And actually, right when I came in, Adeline Gray was there too. So that was a really great experience for me.
They've also got a wrestler, Marley Smith has been on their roster, and Kelsey Campbell before her was one of the only women on the team at Arizona State. What's it been like to be around a mind like Zeke Jones, for example, who's got a world championship, he's got an Olympic medal, and technically is one of the best coaches in the world?
I can only just say one thing. I was taking notes like crazy. I have a huge notebook from when I was training there. Like I had to note down everything. He knows so much, so many variations. It's crazy. It was, it was something else. It doesn't really compare to anything. And I'm really grateful for that opportunity.
What's the learning curve been like to where you feel like you can pick up things faster and faster, even picking up the sport at I guess some people would say an advanced age? You have been wrestling since you were 6, like a lot of the men who were on the wrestling team there at Arizona State are like. I mean, how quickly do you feel you pick up these techniques and are able to learn?
I haven't really picked them up very fast, but I did practice them a lot. But after 3 months of training there, I really started picking up stuff very fast. So that's what the experience was like for me, because I also had to fill in a lot of gaps in my basics. And actually the RTC practice was really great because most of our wrestling warm-up drills were practicing basics, practicing stance and motion, hand fighting. So after I filled in the gaps in my basics, I started picking up stuff much, much faster.
From what you experienced in Romania in training in the women's freestyle and the female wrestling, as they will term it in Europe, training techniques, just basically the general understanding of how sport works. We have our collegiate system and then our elite club level system. And then of course we have the world-class athlete program, the military for Greco and women. What is the system like in Romania specifically for women's wrestling?
Referring to what, conditioning or
practicing, training, clubs, that type of stuff. How does somebody, do what you do? I mean, here in the US, you go to college, then you go to a club.
Oh yeah, we only have clubs. So you have to go to a club. We have in Bucharest, we only have 2 clubs or 3. And in the countryside, we have a lot more. And most of our really good wrestlers are actually from the countryside. They're not from the capital city. But yeah, you basically just go and sign up to a club. And that's how you started. Sadly, we do not have collegiate wrestling.
You've had an interesting run of this recently, as I understand. You've been trying to go home for a while now. When did you start trying to go home, and what type of, hijinks have you basically been going through these last couple of months and weeks?
It has sucked. I tried to go home in May. It was May 19th. I was supposed to fly home. And literally 2 weeks before, my flight got canceled. And, it sucked. I wasn't really training at all. Everything was shut down. So I was basically only running on mountains all day, just getting my conditioning up. But anyways, after that, I tried to go home again. And at the airport, they canceled my flight. Literally, I was at the airport in San Diego. And they told me, okay, you can't go home. And I'm like, okay. So I had to return, And now I'm finally...
Drive to San Diego, or did you fly from Phoenix to San Diego?
No, we drove to San Diego, actually. I wanted to see California. So we drove to San Diego. It was a really long drive. And I get there, finally, let's go home. And at the airport, they're like, okay, well, this is it. You can't go home. It was like so stressful. But yeah, now I finally got my ticket and I'm going home this Thursday. So hopefully I can finally go home.
Yeah, this would be like your third or fourth attempt at trying to go home since May, right?
Yeah. Yes.
You're talking about, the military years. What I'm wondering is you've been over here for a couple of years. What's this mean for like your military service, that type of thing? How does that work? And you've been out of the country for 2 years. I mean, are you like as an athlete for them where you can go train where you need to?
Yes, that is how it is. When you're wrestling for the military, actually the military club is a bit different from actual people who are in service. So I'm totally able to like go and train anywhere I want.
So why not the desert of the United States of America?
Yeah, and I love ASU. Like one of my biggest reasons for which I came here was actually Kelsey Campbell, because she was a big inspiration when I first started wrestling, because she started wrestling really late too, and she was an Olympian and everything. And I actually got to meet her in Romania before I came to Arizona. So that was really, really great, and it's one of the reasons I'm actually in Arizona right now.
So now the battles in trying to get back, in terms of what have you had to go through? I mean, are there, it's not like you can just buy a ticket, you've got to have obviously your passports and whatnot have to be up to date and all of that type of thing. But what are some of the hurdles you've had to go through in trying to go back home?
Honestly, I didn't really have much other than financial side because of the coronavirus. Tickets were very expensive. It took a really long time to get my refund. So that was like definitely the biggest hurdle, trying to get my money back and regrouping and actually finding a flight. Because when I was trying to find flights, most of them were like $2,000 one way. So, that is a lot of money compared to how flights usually are. So that was definitely the biggest problem.
Communication back home. I mean, we've got a lot of talk about the positive tests with COVID-19, and from what you know about where your family is, where you're from. I mean, what are the outbreak number or the pandemic numbers look like there? I mean, do you feel safe traveling in this climate we're in right now?
I definitely feel safe traveling. Romania has really good quarantine rules. I actually, after I get back to Romania, I will have to quarantine for 2 weeks. Everybody has to wear a mask, so it's definitely one of the safest places to travel to right now with the situation.
What's one thing that you've seen from, your friends and family back home that, it's like, yeah, you're ready to go back home, but how soon do you think you can come back here and continue training?
Everybody, that's like the big question for everybody. My dad actually owns a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu gym, and my mom is an athlete. She's a kickboxer. All of my siblings train, and my whole life is actually in this world. So people always ask, come back. We know you're not training yet. Like, when are you gonna come back, pick it up, start the competitional season again, and everything. So, yes, it's definitely been a major question for me from everyone around me.
Now we look at the calendar right now as we record this. Everybody's supposed to be in Tokyo. This is when the 2020 Olympic wrestling competition is supposed to be going on. This delay, at least of a 1 year, as we know right now, this seems to maybe work in your favor, as you've got another year to get better and have a chance to make the Olympic team.
Yeah, definitely. I'm actually very, very excited for it because I was dreaming of 2020, but I actually had some really severe injuries to my shoulder, to both of my knees and my neck, which didn't allow me to train for a long time, like 6 or 7 months. And, that dream kind of flew out of the window, but now, that I have more time to prepare, I'm definitely happy about it. I really am, despite the disastrous situation our like world is in right now and the travel restriction. There is definitely this good side that we have 1 more year to prepare.
When you go back home to train, or you go back home and you said you've got that training environment with the combat sports there, I mean, it kind of makes it's the next question is how big is combat sports as a whole in Romania, not just wrestling?
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is really, really big. A lot of people do it. There are a lot of clubs around the countries and MMA as well. But and wrestling is definitely gaining popularity more and more, especially in Bucharest. Greco-Roman wrestling is getting a lot of popularity. We have like over 30 or 40 cadets just in Bucharest alone. So that are picking it up.
When I go overseas, I've been to numerous world championships, and it seems that the countries that are good in Greco, your Denmark has hosted world championships. They put Greco last. Hungary put Greco last. I mean, it's one of those things that the Greco-Romans in Eastern Europe seems to be a thing. From what you've seen, why do you think the Eastern Europeans are more favorable or more favored to Greco-Roman than they are freestyle?
I think it's because of the way we actually wrestle freestyle in general, as opposed to Americans who actually have a really low stance and they move a lot. Like European wrestlers, even in freestyle, they're more upper body oriented, a higher stance, moving their opponent more as opposed to moving around them. So I think it's just a preferred style in general.
We look at your goals. I mean, we touched on Tokyo, but at your age and having not been beaten up by this sport, I guess from a younger age, you seem to probably have a career path that maybe go another Olympic cycle or possibly even two. Where do you want to go with this sport, and where do you see your ultimate, career goals once you're done wrestling too?
I really, really want to coach. It's one of my biggest dreams. I want to develop freestyle wrestling for females, possibly even in the U.S. Because I'm here in Arizona, actually volunteering at high schools, trying to grow the sport. So definitely that's my ultimate goal, coaching. But we'll have to see. I'm still 22. It's a bit shaky, what I want to do. But I definitely do want to go to college, and I really do want to wrestle in college. And hopefully I'll be wrestling at Life University this year.
Yeah, that was my next question is when we do have a wrestling season, we don't know when that's going to be. And the time you've spent here, you're college age. So Life University, how did they show up on your radar? Coach Ashley Sword and I, we've been friends since she was in high school. So we've known each other a really long time. So how does Life end up on the radar for you?
Actually, I think my boyfriend contacted her and let her know I was here. And Coach Ashley contacted me and we kept in touch. And then I got to talk to a Christian who is a really, really great coach. From what I haven't trained with him, but just by the way he talks and he analyzed my videos. And I said, okay, this is going to be the best training environment for me. I don't think there's anything better for my wrestling than actually going to Life. And this is the main reason for which I want to go there. And also because I want to further my college education, because after I finished high school, I was like, okay, I'm not going to go to college. I'm just going to focus on wrestling. And this is what I did for 10 hours a day. And I suddenly feel that need to have another activity and to further my intellectual activity as well. So I think it would be so great.
Yeah, and you've got an interesting perspective. What is your opinion on what groups like Wrestle Like a Girl and USA Wrestling, with their sanctioning push to get high school girls wrestling tournaments and state tournaments sanctioned? It's a movement that has really exploded in the last 3-4 years. I mean, what are your opinions on what you've seen from groups like Wrestle Like a Girl and the rise of women's wrestling in the United States?
I think it's a great, great thing. I think wrestling should honestly be mandatory, in high school as a subject. For females, it's such a great thing. Actually, wrestling saved my life 2 or 3 times. I almost got raped in a taxi once. I mean, it just gives me so much confidence in myself and to be able to respond in violent situations. So, it's really, really good for girls, for themselves, for their development, first of all, to do wrestling, and of course, to rise the international level of women's wrestling. So I think it's a great movement, and I think it should be an international movement.
I want to go back to the taxi thing, okay? And not to bring up a bad situation, but explain how the sport of wrestling saved your life in that moment.
I think because in wrestling, we're used to reacting in violent situations and very stressful situations. I've never really been mentally relaxed in sparring. It's always a hustle, when you're competing. And at that very moment, it really trains your flight or fight instinct. And this guy literally pulled me by the hair and dragged me. And I just elbowed the guy in the nose, just smashed his nose, jumped out of the car and ran away. And I don't think I would have had that confidence without wrestling. And I've had another incident with a guy, and I was walking outside at night, and this guy literally just grabbed me and tried to rip my dress off. So I just punched him in the face, double leg takedown him, and just punched him in the face until I was knocked out, and people dragged me off of him. So I'm really grateful, I was able to save myself in those situations, and I would have definitely not been capable to do this without wrestling and all the mental toughness that wrestling gives you.
seems to be a degree of empowerment there that, you can, what to do in those situations. And that's not something I was expecting to hear. I was just talking about your travel plight, but now you've kind of explained that wrestling saved your life not once, but twice potentially. And the opportunity to go to college in the United States, the chance to try to go home and train for a little bit before you come. Are you dealing with everything? I mean, this has been a really robust and dynamic journey you've had since discovering the sport.
Yes, I mean, wrestling changed my life. I mean, I just can't even put into words like how I developed in confidence. I was bullied a lot when I was a little girl, and like getting wrestling, really upped my confidence. I feel, confident going out on the street. And I don't know, just my mental health is really, really good. It just helped me with everything. I got to come to America and experience different cultures. I got to compete, and I don't think there's anything in this life that can compare to like wrestling as an experience. And, like Dan Gable says, once you've wrestled, anything in life is easy. And I really do thoroughly agree with that.
Now, you touched on the mental health aspect of it. How much does wrestling as a sport, as an activity, as a physical fitness type of thing really help with mental health?
I definitely would say it helps a great deal because I think in wrestling, more than any other sport, you get the feeling that you have control over another person. You're overpowering another person. And that just by, being able to pin someone or scoring a really, really good takedown that you set up perfectly, that gives you a degree of confidence. I can do this. I'm better. So I think that really something that really helped me a lot.
What's one thing you discovered about wrestling that you're taking away from the sport that you had no idea you were going to get out of this?
Honestly, it's just not one thing with wrestling. I think there's so much I didn't expect about wrestling. I didn't expect like the family bonds you'd make with other people. When I came to America, if even when I'm somewhere randomly and I tell somebody I wrestled, we're already best friends. We're exchanging numbers, Facebook, let me follow your activity. And, again, the confidence that wrestling gives you. And I don't know, there's really so much. I don't think I can really summarize it in one word, like everything about it, really everything about it. It's very unexpected. It's not just about the athletic. It's a social experience. I think that's the most unexpected thing. It's actually a social experience. It's not just a sport.
Yeah, in the United States, we've got various social experiences, whether they be wrestling tournaments, dual meets, national championships, and such. And in the time you got before you got to go to practice before you pack up and fly to Europe. What were some of the things about the experience at Arizona State? I mean, they beat Penn State this year in a dual meet, and the fans rushed them out. I mean, what's been your experiences like in watching college wrestling up close these last 2 years?
I love it. I think it's the best thing ever. If I were a guy, I'd wrestle folk style. I'd get folk style for females and I'd make folk style in international sports. I think it's the best thing ever. I am in love with ASU wrestling and what they did with their wrestling program. Obviously the Valencia brothers were a valuable addition. And now we have all the other guys on the rosters, really. The guy from New York, Jacory. We have Jacory, who's really, really good. And, I'm having a little bit of a moment, which I don't remember the names, but most of our guys are really, really good. And now we have Schultz, right, on the team. So I'm really excited. I'm very invested in ASU's journey in collegiate wrestling. And I really do think in the next couple of years, we're going to have another national title. And honestly, if ASU gets a wrestling team, I'd really, really love to wrestle at ASU.
Yeah, so that was one of the things. Like if things do materialize with ASU, because women's wrestling's been supported there by Sunkist for a long, long time, and if Arizona State does end up having a women's wrestling team, that'd probably be a tough choice because you're looking to go to life, and you've spent so much time in Arizona with the program there. Now, in the time we got left, what are your immediate worries? I mean, are you worried about when you go home about being able to come back?
I am definitely terrified about this. I had a problem with my visa, my visa expired and I couldn't go home even though I tried a lot. I had a lot of mishaps trying to renew my stay here, so that was extremely stressful. So that's definitely going to be a problem coming back. But also with the whole situation with the coronavirus, you don't know for how long travel is going to be closed. And I think if I'm really going to get back on track and actually have a shot at 2021 in Tokyo, I will have to do it in the US. and train in the US. So I'm really stressed about not being able to come back and further my training.
And in some cases, getting into this country from outside of it is sometimes just as difficult. I remember going to Brazil and I had to file all these forms and paperwork. It with 3 months of employment and bank statements and stuff like that. It's not easy to get into some of these countries, and in some cases, it's those governments reciprocating and saying it's hard for us to go there. Well, it's hard for you to come here. What are some of the things that you have to do, maybe that are extra to get into the United States that those of us Americans who, quite frankly, don't travel outside of the States don't know about?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot you have to do to get a visa. I mean, you have to prove that, you're staying somewhere, that you have money to support yourself in that country, that you're actually going where you're going. Actually, when I flew through LAX, and the immigration officer actually looked up and to see if ASU was real and their wrestling team was actually real. So it was definitely stressful, but it was definitely easier for me because I have strong ties with my countries, because that's one thing you have to prove when you're applying for a visa in the US, is that you are not willing to immigrate. And you have to prove that you have strong ties with your country. Me being on a national team and also a military member, that definitely helped a lot and is my process. But it's definitely a pretty complicated process to come to the US.
Now, in terms of the coaching back home, I mean, the national team, I mean, what do they say about you training overseas, and what's that relationship like with the national team staff in Romania?
They were extremely excited for me. Everybody was so excited that I'm gonna go and get to experience another style of wrestling, because I think part of being a good wrestler is actually taking stuff from everywhere. I feel like wrestling is so different in so many countries. There are some good things that maybe fit you better in another style of wrestling than your own country style of wrestling, like how I felt when I came to America and I learned how to move really, really well, because you see a lot of people like Henry Cejudo and people who are really, really fast, really good with misdirection. I feel like Europe doesn't really have that misdirection and slickness as much as the US does, and it's definitely something that I took from the US, like reshots and misdirection. So yeah, they were actually very excited for me to go here and learn from American wrestling, because at the end of the day, right now I think US is like the top nation for wrestling, right? Like in men's wrestling, they're the best, competing with the Russia. So everybody was really, really excited for this experience for me.
All right, getting into some of the things that don't involve wrestling, about you coming to the United States for the last years, what were some of the most unique foods that you encountered your first time? I like sampling foods from different cultures, so that's the food question, something I always like asking. But I mean, what was the strangest thing that you first experienced? You were like, what is that? And you guys really eat this stuff?
Nothing really. I mean, oh yeah, no, I'm lying. Deep fried stuff. I ate deep fried Oreos, and I was like, "Are you serious? You guys are deep frying Oreos? Like, what is wrong with you people?" And then I found out Americans really deep fry anything. So I was like, "What the?" I was like, "Ooh, like there's so much oil. Like, what's wrong with you guys?"
Yeah, go to any state fair in the Midwest, you'll see deep fried everything.
And one more thing, in my country, there's no such thing as all-you-can-eat buffets. And when I went to Golden Corral, it was a huge culture shock. It was a huge culture shock. So yeah, that was definitely
If they had, I mean, who would make way? I mean, okay, I have a special place in my heart for a Golden Corral way, way long time ago. We won't get into that story, but yeah, wrestlers and Golden Corral don't seem like they would make much sense together.
No, they do not. But I'm just saying it's an experience. My friends here, when they heard I don't know what all-you-can-eat buffet is, they're like, "You have to see this place." And I came there and I just couldn't believe how much food there was and how bad it was and how greasy it was and how much people eat up. Like I was like, I just couldn't believe it. It was shocking. Like I couldn't believe my eyes. I'm like, I could barely eat a plate. So yeah, that was definitely a culture shock.
Now, what foods did you miss about Romania? Because I've never been to Romania. I've been to Eastern Europe several times, but I know the cultural significance of certain foods mean a lot of different things, different places. So, having no experience in Romanian cuisine, what's one thing that you were unable to find in the United States that you really, really wanted from back home?
Sarmale, it's like this cabbage roll. Oh my God, I missed it so much. And it's a really traditional dish. And also mich, which is like this kind of like sausages. They're not really sausages. They're like, I don't even know how to explain it, but it's like this meat. It's like skinless sausage, I guess. That's like the best way I could describe it. And I couldn't find it here, and I really missed that.
Well, what's one thing you could find here that you weren't expecting to find?
Food-wise?
Yes. I'm still on the food thing. I mean, when I travel, I like food. I like to try the beer and I like to try the food. So obviously the food.
I mean, the thing is with America, you can really find anything. I mean, that was the most shocking part for me is you can find Mexican food, obviously Mexican food, but like Vietnamese food and Korean food and there's Mediterranean food. Like there's really nothing you can't find in the U.S.
Is there much of a Romanian neighborhood or population down there that you may have run into down near Arizona State?
Actually, yes. There's a huge Romanian. I didn't know about it until very recently, but there's a huge Romanian community in North Phoenix.
All right. So those of you that are out there wondering more about this Romanian freestyle women's wrestler here in the United States, going to go back to Romania, going to try to come back, maybe wrestle with the NAIA program at Life outside of Atlanta. Where can they follow you on social media and where can they keep up with your travels?
Oh, yeah, they can keep up with my travels on my Facebook, which is Simona Buibar. And, that's where I post everything about my wrestling journey.
It's been an interesting journey. We'll catch back up with you down the road somewhere. Appreciate the time. And tell your man, John, I appreciate the lead. This has been a pretty interesting conversation and an interesting story to learn about.
Yeah, nice seeing you again, and thank you for having me.
The Short Time Wrestling Podcast is proudly outfitted by Compound Sportswear. Shirts, singlets, custom gear orders, everything you need. Call up Cliff and the crew at cmpteamwear.com. Hey, you know what? Did you like the show? You want to hit that subscribe button? MattTalkOnline.com/listen. Various different ways to subscribe to this show on your favorite podcatcher of choice. And if you're already subscribed and you already listen and you love the show and you want to support this show and this network, MattTalkOnline.com/join the team. Become a team member today.